You're not acting like you're really happy to see me and thrilled
I'm happy.
to be
I'm
doing your
happy.
podcast. You know,
I'm
Roger, not everyone gets to do a podcast.
Especially with you.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. I give up.
And your lovely wife standing by.
She's already left. That's, you know, yeah, I'm telling you what, after about 30 years of marriage and 45 knowing each other, she leaves quick.
Well, remember, Tammy Wynette didn't say they stood for very long. Just kind of a brief appearance, a cameo, and then they leave. Just ask Hillary.
Hello, I'm Michael Shawn, and welcome to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. Roger Dykes is a teacher and counselor with a master's degree in family counseling from Texas Tech University. He is the owner of UV Blake Records and has written a book titled Non-Persons Rolling in a Normal World. And there's a few more things. Roger was born with cerebral palsy. Now a quadriplegic, he has been confined most of his life to a wheelchair. And for a while, even enjoying a career as a stand-up or sit-down comedian and after-dinner speaker. Disabled? Yes, but you forget about that pretty quickly because Roger thrives. So here is Roger Dykes.
Hey, Michael, it's good to be with you again today.
Oh, yeah, man, Roger. And as we have pointed out so many times before, there is actually a camera on you because you're the star of the podcast. And you, sir, are looking chipper.
Well, thank you, sir. But the reality is that the only reason there's not a camera on you is because you're too cheap to get your computer fixed.
Since you said that, I got to tell you though, we got to bring the makeup artist in on you, the glam squad, because we're going to have to do a little makeup powder across the top of your head because I'm getting some glare anytime you put your head down.
Well, that's only because I got a haircut.
Well, and it looks fantastic. You're kind of Yul Brynner of the disabled set.
Have you ever considered the fact that the shorter you get your hair cut, the fewer times you have to go to the barbershop?
That's something we older guys begin to notice.
There you go.
You are correct, sir. Hey, Roger Dykes, Just Sayin, folks, a podcast that deals with issues and the long list of issues that disabled people particularly deal with, and a few others too. I think something that we don't talk about enough, we talked about in the first podcast or two, but the fact that you had this career for a time when you were working after dinner speaker and nightclub acts and so on and so forth. And people just can't imagine what a glitzy guy you were. And you kept them with a grin on their face, in stitches, so to speak. I think your humor played so well, and you dared go where very few actual comedians have ever gone, and that is after a few minutes, you would completely confront the fact that you are disabled and in a wheelchair and do what you call wheelchair humor. And you're actually the only person that's ever done that to the extent that I've ever seen the way you did that. And it was, with all due respect, sir, funny. It was absolutely funny, and a lot of people got a kick out of it. You ever think about those times?
Oh, yeah. I've got pictures on my wall of those times, and I think fondly of those because that was the part of my career that I enjoyed the most and hoped would continue the longest.
Yeah. Yeah. You had so many issues you had to deal with, like when you'd go out and be on the road, be somewhere overnight. People just don't have a clue how not simple a thing like that is for a person that is a quadriplegic and requires a lot of help for simple things. Yet you barreled right on through and managed to accomplish it quite a bit.
Well, we did that. We tried to always work our schedule where we were only gone during the day and got back before nightfall, which eliminated the motel problem, which we would have had. That was part of my manager's job, was to keep things rolling. That way he would be with me, and he was trained to help me on a limited basis. But the problem, of course, became when we get to the night lodging. Yes, they had motel rooms with wide bathroom doors and all of that. That was fine. But I needed more help than that in getting in and out of bed. So we tried to avoid the overnight routine, which meant we came in some very early mornings when we would leave the show and drive back home or fly back home, as the case may be.
Well, we're talking about the disabled, as we often do with you on your podcast. I've got a list of questions that people have sent us one way or another. But just yesterday, I thought I was all ready to go for this session on this podcast. And Roger, I received a text from a well-meaning friend and a listener to your podcast. And if you will be so kind, sir, as to give us a little bit of your reaction or your thoughts at this point, and then maybe in our next episode, we could follow up on this, because the dynamics of what this talks about are far-reaching. It says that a new Texas rule went into effect in the last few days that allows social workers to turn away clients who are or have disabilities. This, in effect, allows a return to discrimination towards persons with disabilities. And this listener thought that you might have a comment on that. You're usually on top of this sort of thing, but this is brand spanking new that has come out of Austin. How does that hit you? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing that hits me is it will be rewritten. I don't think this strikes me as something that was hastily put together and not thought through very well. Social workers are well known for working with the disabled. It would seem rather contradictory to then be able to turn away the disabled when that's part of what they were trained to work with. I know
no kidding.
I know the social worker community is probably a bit upset over this because it kind of goes against what their training in school and so forth. But I will say that and if you take it on its face value, of course, it looks discriminatory. I think what they were trying to do was bring the social worker guidelines in relation to Texas law, not as a discriminatory thing necessarily, although that's what it turns out to be. So I suspect what's going to happen is that probably by the next time we have a podcast, even, there'll be some changes made in wording and not necessarily in concept.
Well, and this listener goes on to say that, in their opinion, it is contradicting everything that being a social worker is. And that would be the way I think a lot of us people that are just regular folks and probably not as in touch with things of this sort as you are, but that just right off the surface, right off the bat, we think, what the heck? Right. How can they do this? And so I will tip my hat, sir, to your knowledge and experience. You've studied this all of your life. I will stand quietly behind you on this issue. But I tell you what, on our next episode, maybe we might address this a little further, give you a chance to do a little homework.
Well, I don't think it's so much homework I'm going to be able that I need as much as it is in 3 weeks. The legislation may have been tweaked, and it may fix all these issues before they actually go so far as to set it in stone as a state law.
Do we need to cover anything else on your love life on this episode? And the last couple of episodes, we brought that up.
Actually, we pretty well covered it last time, and nothing, unfortunately, has changed between times. So I'm just as lonely today as I was the last time we talked.
Oh, Roger, I have such a good time with you. Thank you, sir. We do a lot of things at your expense, and that, of course, is one of them. I've got a good question for you, and it's something you and I have talked about personally several times. The care for someone in your condition and the disabled that you are very thankful for, that comes from the government. The state government controls that and makes decisions on that. And you've said many times that you are thankful for that, but there are some concerns. This question, I thought, boiled it down as good as anything I've ever heard. With most state and federal workers receiving regular cost of living pay increases, why do you think, Roger, it has been years and years since an increase is available funds to the increase in home assistance pay? And is there anything that would bring the need to the attention of our state officials?
Well, I can assure you I have spent this past week working specifically on that issue. I have not talked to my senator or my representative, but I've talked to both of their staffs and reminding them again that we have an issue of lack of money. I'm not a person who believes you can solve all problems by simply throwing more money at it. But the reality is that the amount of money I'm given to spend connected with the already stated amount that I can spend. Most people do not realize this, and I'm not sure it's true of every program, but I suspect it is most. This particular program that I'm on, the class program, designates specifically how much you can pay, and you cannot pay more than that. And if you did, well, they won't let you, but if you could, you'd run out of money before the end of the year. So you've got a twofold problem. You need to relax the money that's being given, and you need to allow me the opportunity to pay more money. Let me illustrate the point. I'm allowed at this point to pay in the neighborhood of $13 an hour maximum. I was in Target yesterday. As I went into Target, there is a sign on the Target door that says we are hiring, and the starting pay is $15 an hour. When you put those two ideas together, you see I have a problem.
Yeah, and Roger, that $13 an hour that you just mentioned is maybe not where you would start someone, but that's after they've been with you a significant amount of time, and you've given them every raise that you can give them, and it's still just at $13.
That's the top.
Yeah.
In other words, if you have a caregiver that's been with you, say, 10 years, and you're paying them the maximum because they've been with you for that long, and you start a new employee today, you can't start them at $13 an hour because the one at the top will be quite upset about that.
Well, at least the one at the top, you don't want them to find out, and it shouldn't be about keeping secrets from everyone.
Well, you just can't do that. Now, the other problem being that the minimum wage for healthcare workers is $8 an hour, not $7.50, but $8 an hour. That was by state legislation. Now, first of all, you're not going to find anybody, for the most part, that will do this kind of work for even $8
certainly
an hour.
Yeah.
But if you do a little bit of math, you can figure out that the difference between the top dollar I can pay and the minimum I can start with is how much? $5.
Yeah.
So there's only $5 worth of difference between a 20-year employee and somebody hired yesterday.
Well, that's an impossible situation, especially now that it is many years behind the curve on what the market allows. And especially if you compare apples to apples, if you compare home care people that come to your home and do specialized care,
right.
That is ridiculous that they would continue to be able to work for that amount.
My understanding is that when you go to work for one of the home care, and I'm sure it varies, but they start people at $10 an hour. So now if I started there, if I started my new employees at $10 an hour, there would only be $3 difference between the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
So
there's no longevity to that.
20 years would get you $3.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Roger, I appreciate you commenting on that. It is a problem. It's not like we haven't brought that up before, but I think every time I hear you talk about that, it just gets a little clearer in my mind that there is a real disconnect between the people who are supposedly handling your financial affairs to a certain extent and making decisions for you. In this case, in Austin. And again, there is a very frustrating thing here. And just allow me to say this, Roger. The more I learn about the issue, the less, particularly here in the days of COVID, the less I see the state actually paying any attention to this situation, or more or less people in your situation in general, as an entire slice of the pie. And do you have any thoughts on that, Roger?
Well, yes, I do. And the number one thought I have is, as a group, the disabled are not considered a voting bloc. And since most politicians work off the idea of being reelected, we as a group, the disabled, pose no threat to them of taking them out of their office. As a result, when that is one of your major considerations of staying in office, I become, and people like me, become low on the totem pole of interest by the politicians. I do not mean to indict anyone. That's not my point. I'm talking to you today as a realistic reality of how politics in general works. Politics works this way. It's called power and money. The disabled have neither power nor money. Therefore, we serve as at the behest of whatever committee in Austin or Washington wants to decide.
All right, Roger, I understand what you're saying, and your answers are intelligent and concise, but I got to tell you, speaking from the heart, I don't know if there's room for this on this podcast, but Roger, it just burns me up. And I would like to add something to what you're saying. Shame on you, you guys. Really? A person has to be a certain level of political threat for you to do your job? And Roger, there's something else too. We need to remind these people in Austin, and let me tell you how we can do it. It's like podcasts like this one and a whole lot more. Because here's the thing, a guy like Roger Dykes may someday just feel like hanging his head a little bit and saying, you know what, I'm disabled. I don't have the money that I need to have. I have no political clout. It is so hard to get things done, even when I'm right and they're wrong. It's hard to get things done. It's hard just to get anyone to listen. But here's the deal, Roger. People like you have friends. It varies from person to person, but they have friends. They have people they go to church with. They have people that they socialize with. They have friends, and those friends are voters, and those friends have friends that spread the story and spread the news. And I just don't, and call me naive, Roger. I mean, go ahead and call me naive, but it would just seem to me that on a deal that is just so bloody ugly and stupid as this, I mean, anyone can see this, and yet it's allowed to go on month after month, year after year. I would feel like the word would get out. And through people like you, Roger, that just talk about it, but you do it in such a way that your job is not to lash out, but instead to just educate. And then along comes a guy like me that you have to keep a bridle on and perhaps tells the rest of the story. But anyway.
Well, we would always be open to and willing to talk with anyone on the state level or federal level or even the local level that would get our message to people who would listen to us. This is the major problem I'm facing right now today. It's two-pronged. One, everybody suffers with. The other is slightly different. One, COVID has shut Austin down. You cannot do anything in Austin, Texas right now, because I was talking to even a state representative, my state representative's field person told me that she can't get Austin to return her calls, and he is a state representative in Austin. So obviously that's working against us. Secondly, though, and equally important, or more important, I have yet to find out. I'm on this class program, and I have not been able to find out who is in charge in Austin of the class program. You'd think that would be simple, but it's not. It's under the heading of Health and Human Services. The problem with that is an umbrella as big as Texas. It covers so many different agencies that trying to trace it down. I have communicated with the director of Health and Human Services. We were in negotiation when COVID hit, and of course that just disrupted everything.
Yeah.
But the people who specifically need to talk with, I've talked to Governor Abbott, for example. Not lengthy, but he knows me. I know him. Now, he is more obviously disabled himself, so he's concerned. But it's way below his pay grade to deal with what I'm needing. And he doesn't know where these people are either. In other words, it's just a matter of bureaucracy. And there's somebody or a small group of people somewhere in this state, and specifically in Austin, that could fix and deal with and work with me on these issues that would help a lot of people.
Roger, let me ask you a question, and we're about to run out of time. Can you believe it? But there is one more question I would like to address that ties in to what we're talking about. Disability, why do you think that it is viewed as a social problem? And I double-checked on this, and the government views disabilities as a social problem. Can you connect the dots on that, Roger?
Well, it is a social problem because it's not, and because of what it isn't. It's not a government problem. It's a matter of trying to keep us involved in the social community of the state of Texas in this case. So we are considered a social issue and our issues become those kind. Now, for me, it's not a social problem, it's a physical problem. But for the way the government looks at it, it's a matter of trying to keep us involved and in society, which this specific program I'm talking about that I'm on is designed specifically to keep people like me out of nursing homes and institutions and at home where I'm still part of the, according to them, still part of the community.
And you certainly are.
And
yes.
that then makes it a social problem.
Well, the government kind of acts like at this point they want to have it both ways. They want to accomplish what you just said, and they don't really want to pay for that.
Well, that's true, but I think, Michael, more importantly, most of the people who've written legislation, and again, I appreciate all the work that's been done, but most of the people who write legislation, put in ramps, widen doors, all the nice things that have been done for us as a group, as the disabled, they have never been where we are. And as a result, when they do have someone in their family who is disabled, then they begin to get a better understanding of the problem. If I might add very quickly, and that is that over the years I've seen, and I was part of a group years and years ago that had the city council people of Lubbock in wheelchairs for a day, just to help educate them to some of the issues. And while that was good, and it did serve a minimal purpose, the problem with that idea is that while you, for example, or any of my other walking normal friends can get in a wheelchair, and you can see, you'll pick up on very quickly some of the problems that we have. But in the back of your mind, you know that in the morning when you get out of bed, you're going to stand up. And so it's a temporary thing, and you think about it as a temporary issue. Whereas when it becomes your life, then you have to deal with it on a daily basis.
Yeah. Roger, thank you so much for your time today. You know, a lot of people don't know it, but there is not a whole lot of money in podcasting. And yet,
really?
You are here, you're front and center, and we so appreciate it.
So now you're telling me I'm not getting paid.
Hey, I love you, brother. We'll see you next time, all right?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. If you'd like to get a message to Roger, his Facebook account is listed as Roger Dykes. Become a friend, or you can send your questions and comments to rogerdykes51@gmail.com. That's ROGERDYKES51@gmail.com. Our podcast reveals a new episode every 3 weeks. Rollout is on Wednesday evening, shortly after dark, Texas time. Join us next time for our next episode of Roger Dykes Just Sayin. I'm Michael Shawn. On behalf of Roger Dykes, thanks for listening.